Yeah. So that one's hard, right? Because that one requires a truth that's uncomfortable, right? And the biggest difference between a broken marriage and one that's never been better was the guy you're staring at on the through the screen, right? I was working on just being the provider, right? And I mean, whatever it took, right? And I was commuting. I was working in Atlanta. We were living in Orlando. I was gone 5 days a week. I would fly home and I would be exhausted. And there hit a moment where I did all the stuff that people do, right? That I was drinking too heavy. I was getting too tired coming home from to come home on the weekends and just was gone, right? So I started living this life where my wife and I, my ex-wife and I, we didn't talk, right? We didn't sit around a dinner table and eat, right? And I mean, and then it came down to at some point, right? I had this brainiac idea of, all right, well, listen, I'm gonna see this one through until my daughter's old enough, right? So I'm gonna be here with her. We're gonna keep this marriage together until she's old enough, and then we'll deal with this. And my oldest daughter has looked at me several times, and she was like, "Oh, I knew." Like that you guys should have been done way earlier, But again, that goes to what we've talked about, right? Like the manly thing to do was to grit it out, right? Was to stay in it. And there was just a lot of truths that I hid from myself and a lot of lies I told myself to avoid dealing with some harsh realities in that relationship. And now I can speak freely to my wife, right? I share how I'm feeling with my wife now. So there was one problem in my first relationship, and there's one great part of this relationship, and really the biggest part was me, right? And who I brought. I was the problem in the first one, and now I bring, and again, not always perfect, but my wife can count on me to bring exactly who I am and to be present. And to just, when I'm struggling, I'll look at her and say, I'm struggling today, right here, and here's why, instead of living in just silence. And
Mm.
and when you're not telling the truth, especially to yourself, and when you're holding these things in, and again, we've talked about this, you're already carrying those feelings, right? They don't just fade away. All of those conversations that you don't have, all of those words you don't say, they just sit inside of you and spin and spin and spin.
Mm.
Silence, that I was a silent guy for a very long time. And it
Brutal
just,
honesty.
yeah, it took a lot away from me.
Yeah, it's so true. My wife and I talk about it, we get asked as well, like, what's the key to the strong relationship that we have? I mean, even before we went through the stuff where I asked for a divorce and, we went through the dark days, as I call them, the growth days is what I should call them. Is people still used to be like, "You guys' relationship's so amazing, I wish I could find a relationship like yours." And I remember at times people would say that. I'm like, I am so unhappy right now. And it had nothing to do with my wife. It had everything to do with me. And now people still say it to this day. And I'm like, it's communication, man. Like it's
Yeah.
communication being present. You know, that whole absent makes the heart grow fonder is a bunch of bullshit. You know, if you're not
Yeah.
present, then it does. I'm curious because I mean I can't relate to it. I'm that again, I'm one of the 15% of relationships that make it through those really dark days. Why don't you believe, Scott, that was it too far gone? Was it that well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what was it about that first marriage that made it so it wasn't salvageable?
Yeah, it was so far gone. I had a lot of misdeeds, right? So I was running wild for a long time, right? And it was one of those moments where I had done enough damage to where she was never really gonna find forgiveness for me. And again, like, listen, I'll stand up and say probably a good idea on her side, right? And again, this comes down to I was the one that wrecked that, right? I ran wild. And again, a lot of it was just in my own silence. I mean, I was 46 years old the first time that I realized that I was loved. I was doing an ayahuasca journey, and the entire journey was about I was loved. And I mean, to the point where I started calling people the next day to say, "Hey, I'm really sorry about that. I had no idea that you left. Right. So that
Yeah.
was the guy, that was the shell of a guy that had gone through 46 years of life, never even realizing that anyone loved him. And you can do a lot of really wild stuff when you don't know you're loved.